Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the forum with Lubbock Police Department about anti-Asian hate crimes. My name is Kirk Key, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University. And I'm also the Communication Committee co-chair of the Texas Tech University Chinese Faculty and Staff Association. It is my pleasure to serve as your moderator this evening. Today, we have a very unique opportunity to explore the topic of anti-Asian hate crimes in Lubbock, bringing together the Lubbock Police Department, various organizations at Texas Tech University, and members of the Lubbock community, Asians, Pacific Islanders, and allies. To start us off, I would like to invite Dr. Hong Zhang, Professor of Plant Molecular Biology and Plant Biotechnology, who is also the president of the TTU Chinese Faculty and Staff Association, to give his remarks. Please welcome Dr. Zhang.
Thank you, Kurt, especially for your effort in organizing this forum with LPD. And I also thank LPD Chief Floyd Mitchell and Assistant Chief Jonathan Caspel for reaching out to us in the event of this hate crime against Asian American. And I'd like to thank other officers from tonight, Assistant Chief Layson White, and also Lieutenant Chris Powey. Thanks for coming to address the concern from our community here. And when those crimes happened, that really hurt many people here on campus, because we do have a large population of Asian American students, faculty, and staff. And some of us really get concerned, and we didn't know where to go look for help. And then Chief and Mitchell and Casper reached us. That's why we are so grateful for you for this proactive effort to reaching to us. And tonight, we also have a lot of people coming from our association and also our sister organization on Texas Tech campus. And Dee Wen is going to be the person representing AAPI and FSSA, and also numerous student organizations such as the Chinese Student Association, Indian Student Association, Sri Lanka Student Association, Bangladesh Student Association, and Lebanese Student Organization. So TTU is an international university. We do have a large population of Asian students, more than 1,000 of them are here. So if this kind of crime becomes widespread, their safety will be, an issue. Their folks, their parents are thousands of miles away. Their parents are worried about their kids as well. That's why the police, reach to us. We will work together to make Lubbock to be a safe place to live, to study, and only this way we can make our community a better place. Thank you all for showing up. Okay, get back to Kurt.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang, for the opening remarks. And tonight's forum would not be possible without the involvement of several organizations in addition to those that Dr. Zhang just mentioned. And I would like to take a moment to acknowledge them by showing this slide. So I'd like to thank these organizations for partnering with CFSA in making today's forum possible. Without you promoting and organizing and supporting this effort, this event would not happen so smoothly. And we also want to thank many among the leadership of CFSA and also AAPI FSSA for contributing some of the questions that we have collected before the event. And we will be using those questions to help engage a dialogue with LPD. And I also want to thank many of my personal colleagues, students, and friends who had helped spread the words. So thank you. And next, we will hear from Chief Floyd Mitchell from the Lubbock Police Department and his remarks through a video recording. And to facilitate that, I would like to invite Assistant Chief John Caspel to share his screen.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for partnering with us. I know that when we reached out to Dr. Key about this, he jumped right on board and we were excited. You know, before I play Chief Mitchell's opening remarks, just a brief opening statement, because, you know, we at the Lubbock Police Department pay attention to what's going on nationwide, because we understand that when it comes to hate crimes, when it comes to things that are happening in other communities, that certainly can reflect on another big city like Lubbock, Texas. And so when we saw the trends that were happening around the country, we knew that it was the right thing, headed by Chief Mitchell, to reach out to our Asian communities here. And let's have a forum, let's talk about these things. And let's make sure that we have good dialogue so that if something is going on here in Lubbock, like we're seeing nationwide, we need to make sure that our Asian partners in the community, their allies, understand what's happening here in Lubbock and what we at the police department are going to do to help and support them. So unfortunately, after we had already scheduled this, Chief Mitchell then found out he had to travel. We were going to have him remote in and participate, but we didn't want to take the chance that he might have some communication interference. And so we have a video recording message from him, and I'll go ahead and share that and play that now.
Good evening. My name is Chief Floyd Mitchell with the Lubbock Police Department. Unfortunately, due to my travel schedule, I'm unable to join you in real time this evening as we discuss the alarming trend of hate directed at Asian populations. However, members of my executive command staff are here to listen to your concerns and discuss our path forward toward future collaborations on this very important topic. The members in attendance from my staff are department leaders who foster partnerships every day throughout our community. I want to thank Dr. Kirk Key and the Texas Tech University Chinese Faculty and Staff Association for collaborating with our department to participate in this important forum. During our time together this evening, we seek to listen to your concerns and provide you with local resources to assist you should the need arise. We know listening, creating partnerships, and engaging in dialogue about crucial topics is essential to address any instance of hate or violence that may occur in our city. We also hope to connect with those of you in attendance who are allies of our Asian citizens as we join forces to educate and advocate for the safety and security of all who call Lubbock home. We will coordinate a second in-person forum at a later date with Dr. Key to provide feedback and to continue to listen and collaborate. Again, welcome. Thank you for participating and have a great evening.
Well, again, with the chief traveling, there's his welcome message for everybody. And I know I've talked to him many times about this forum, and I know I can express personally from him that he really regrets that he couldn't be here. However, he is here in spirit, and you can trust that the other members of the executive staff, the command staff, myself, Assistant Chief White, Lieutenant Chris Poe, that are all here, as well as members of the patrol division staffs. We're all here to answer questions. One of the key things we want to make sure that we do tonight is listen. We want to absolutely make sure that if there are remarks that we need to hear, questions that need to be answered, we are here for you, and not just tonight, but going forward. And I know I speak on behalf of the chief whenever I say that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Key. I believe that he will be introducing the LPD patrol representative. Then it will come back to me and we'll continue on with the forum. So thank you all again.
Thank you very much, Chief Caspel, for the remarks. And now I would like to invite Assistant Chief Nathan White to provide some statistics to review on hate crimes in Lubbock. Please welcome Chief White. Chief White, you're muted.
We've only been doing this for a year and a half. You think I would know better. I'm going to have to share my screen, so I don't know if somebody has to give me permission to do that or not, but I'll try. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see. Can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right.
It is showing now. Thank you.
It's showing up. Okay. There you go. Let me find. Okay. Did the chart come up with the graphs and the numbers?
No. We can see the logo of the City of Lubbock Police Department.
Okay. Yeah, I want to see what's happening. I apologize. Hang on.
No worries.
We'll tell them to share the screen with me. Hit that stop share, and I'll pull it.
Okay.
It is showing now.
Okay. All right. That was a rough start. I apologize for that. Okay, so the chart you see in front of you shows Part 1 crimes, which are crimes that we report to the federal system, which is called NIBRS. It's how the federal government keeps track of crime statistics in cities and throughout the United States. This shows the type of crime, which is assault, robbery, sex crimes, arson, criminal mischief, burglary, theft, vehicle theft. The next column shows the number of Asian victims for each crime. This is since 2018 to date, to May of 2021. You can see the number in each category. So there were 98 Asian victims of assault, 25 robberies, 5 sex crimes, and on down the column. The next column shows the percentage or the number and percentage of offenders for those crimes. So in other words, for the 98 assaults, 27% of the offenders were Asian. 13% were Black, 31% Hispanic, 22% white, 3% other, and 4% unknown. So it shows a breakdown of how many Asian victims for each crime, and also the number and percentages of the type of offenders for those crimes. So from 2018 to present, we've had no documented Asian victims of hate crimes or homicides for the hate crimes that have been reported to us. I want to make that very clear that that doesn't mean they haven't happened. It means that no one has reported them to the Lubbock Police Department. Chief Caspel will go over some steps and how to make those reports and do those things if needed here in just a minute. But I think it's important to note that it doesn't, we're not saying it doesn't occur. It's just nobody has reported those to us. So the next screen here shows the Part 1 crimes again: homicide, assault, robbery, on down, and then the number of victims for each crime and the percentage by race for our population. So if you'll notice, out of these crimes, for the total amount of percentages for the Asian victims, it's 1% or less for those crimes. And then the next chart is very similar. It shows some similar data where it shows that again, that's about 1% of those crimes are Asian in Lubbock. So it's some good information to have, and it's something we can certainly share. But again, we want to stress that we're not saying those types of hate crimes don't occur, but they haven't been reported. So we'll follow up with that in a minute on how we can make those reports and go from there. But if you have any questions over those numbers, or if you'd like to see those numbers in more depth, please just let us know.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chief White. We appreciate the overview you just provided. And now I would like to invite Assistant Chief John Caspel to talk about community partnerships and how to file a police report. Chief Caspel, welcome.
Absolutely. I'm back. Sorry about, we had a little glitch there, but we wanted to make sure that everyone saw those stats. And just to reemphasize what Chief White was saying, we are certainly not saying that Asian hate crimes don't occur in Lubbock. In fact, I would to share a little story about how we got to know Dr. Key. We got to know Dr. Key because he reported some hate speech that was directed at him through a community partner of ours, Dina Jeffries, who contacted us and said that she knew Dr. Key and he had been the recipient of some hate speech, obviously because of his race. And so because of that, we were able to connect with Dr. Key through our community engagement group, which is headed by Sergeant Steve Bergen. Reached out to him to try and mitigate the situation and find out what was going on and what we could do to try to assist. From that, we formed what really is a beautiful partnership with Dr. Key, and to the extent that we have shared meals. He and some of his folks have brought meals for our patrol officers to show a thank you for our officers and what they do. They made, in this year of coronavirus, they've made masks for us, and we've been able to distribute those out. So, community partnerships like that are really the bread and butter of what makes a situation like this so much better, because we in the law enforcement cannot just solve these crimes and take care of these situations in a vacuum. We really need to build community long in advance of situations happening. So when you have minority populations, be it Black, be it Indigenous, be it people of color, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, a population that has felt that they are marginalized or that they are being targeted, which we have seen in the Asian community throughout the nation, it has a tendency to drive these populations into hiding and make them scared to come forward and report what is happening to them. It is our goal to have these partnerships long in advance so that our minority populations, our Asian population, and their allies know that they do not have to stay in the shadows. To know that that it is safe and it is okay to come forward and talk to law enforcement. You can trust us, so that we can have an idea of what is going on and how to respond to these things. Some of the nature of some of the businesses that some of our minority populations are involved in may make them to where they don't want to come forward, and we need to stop that. We need to avoid all that. Everyone I know knows about the Atlanta shooting, where some Asian businesses were targeted, some massage parlors, and that's not saying that anything bad was going on, but there certainly did seem to be some hesitancy within the population coming forward and talking about what they were really experiencing there. And so we want to make sure, speaking specifically about why we're here in this forum, that the Asian population here in Lubbock knows that it is safe to come forward and talk to us. And we want to continue to build these partnerships with this population, with their allies, to make sure that when instances of hate speech or hate crimes or suspected hate crimes come up, that we need you to report this to us. One of the things that Chief White said is so far we haven't had any reports of hate crimes here in Lubbock directed towards Asian people. Again, that doesn't mean they're not occurring, because they may not be being reported to us. And so we want people to come out of the shadows and talk to us. One of the main reasons for all that is because we need to know where to deploy our resources and where to focus our attention. So if hate crimes are happening with our Asian population here and we don't know about them because they're not reported to us, we're not going to be able to deploy resources or focus our investigative efforts on those specific instances and mitigate that on behalf of certainly the crime victims as well as the rest of the community. So what I'll do now, we talked about community partnerships, I'm going to share screen again, and I'm going to direct everyone to the Lubbock Police Department website. This is what it looks like when you go to lubbockpolice.com. This is a branch of the City of Lubbock's website. We have our own section of it. And when you go to lubbockpolice.com, this is what it looks like. It's a very standard web page. And as you scroll down it, you will come to an area that talks about reports and forms. Below that, you can see down here that on the very front here, it's who to call. So if someone suspects that something suspicious is going on, it can be something as simple as hate speech. It can be a suspicious person. It can be someone certainly that needs to report a crime, that they've been assaulted or that they've been a victim of some other crime. Here are the avenues in which you can reach out to us. Obviously, if it's an emergency, or if you're just not sure how to get hold of us, go ahead and call 911, and that'll get you straight into our police dispatch. If it is a non-emergency situation and you're confident in that, the non-emergency number is listed. If you just need some advice, you're not sure if you need to actually have an officer come out, but maybe you need to speak to a supervisor or just someone in law enforcement over the phone to get some advice if this is a situation that we need to be aware of. You can call the police desk 24/7 and speak to some of our folks there. If you want to remain anonymous and submit a tip, you can do that over the phone as well. Our crime line tip line is down here as well. Now, one of the ways that folks can reach out to us and report crimes, report suspicious activities, is through this reports and forms over here. And so everything can be done over the internet. So whenever you go to reports and forms, it's going to bring up the second page here, and you can file a crime report online here. And when you do that, it's going to pull this up. And this is a very self-guided system about how to file a police report about something that's happened here in Lubbock. It is self-guided. All the instructions are down here on the bottom. You simply will put in the address of where it occurred, and as you click through this, you can file a police report online. You do not have to worry about what if someone worries about, well, why is there a police car out front of this business, or why is there a police car out in front of Dr. Key's house or Dr. John's house? Is something going on there? So this is a way for folks to be able to report what is occurring and still allow for some measure of anonymity. The reports that are filed through here, it's the same as if we were to send an officer out. They all are assigned to our investigative division, and they all receive the same scrutiny. And again, it is so important to report what is happening to us here at the Lubbock Police Department. We just want to make sure that everyone understands there are several avenues in which to reach out to us to let us know what's going on. If it's something along the lines of hate speech, it may not necessarily arise to a criminal offense, but that doesn't mean we don't need to become involved in that, because we don't just get involved in crime situations. We are peacekeepers. Many times we get involved in verbal altercations, or when someone is spewing hate speech against somebody else. Our job is to show up on those and to separate the parties and to create a peaceful situation and to make that situation stop. And so we don't want folks to think, well, just because someone may be calling me something because I'm Asian, I shouldn't call the police. We want you to call us. We want people to come out of the shadows and report these things that are occurring. Again, so that we know where to focus our resources and we can give accurate information to our public. And for the purposes of this forum, to our Asian population and those allied with them, and to give them a measure of peace and security, and knowing that we are going to show up when these types of situations are reported to us. So I will stop share there. Again, just to reemphasize, I've said it many times, call us. If there's something suspicious going on, we are asking for our Asian community and those that are allied with them. If something is going on in this community, knowing that we have a larger Asian population with Texas Tech here, we really want you to reach out to us. But don't just reach out to us whenever there's hate speech being directed, or you're the victim of an assault, or something else is going on. Let's continue to build these bridges in advance. Let's do what Dr. Key and his good folks have done. Let's sit down and break bread. Let's get together and have a cup of coffee and talk, person to person, one-on-one, about what our Asian community is experiencing here in Lubbock. And if there's anything going on that we need to be on top of, that is a great way for us to be proactive and talk about those things in advance. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Key for the rest of the forum.
Great. Thank you, Chief Caspel. That was a really great presentation. Now we would like to move to the Q&A portion of the forum. I would like to invite Ms. Dee Nguyen, founding member of the Texas Tech University Asian American and Pacific Islander Faculty, Staff, and Student Association, and the current president of the Staff Senate at Texas Tech, to help me out here. CSFA collected some questions in advance. Dee will be asking these questions to Chief Caspel, Chief White, Lieutenant Chris Powell, and other representatives from LPD. In the meantime, if members of the audience would like to ask a live question, please raise your hand on Zoom and Dee or I will call upon you to ask your question. Alternatively, if you would like to type your question in chat, Dee can also help you verbally ask the questions to LPD. And with that, I would like to turn it to you, Dee. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this partnership. Chief Caspel brought up a really great point about reporting. And I think this is a great discussion starter between both the LPD and everybody here. So what are common reasons citizens do not report in your experience? And what do you suggest to encourage more reporting?
That's a great question. We're gonna, since that's seems to be a bit of a patrol question, we're going to let Chief White, if you don't mind unmuting and handling that one for us, please.
So there's all kinds of reasons for why people don't report these kinds of incidents. Some of it is mistrust in police. We've seen some of that. Some of it is they just don't think that anything will be done. Different varying reasons, but one thing that I definitely want everyone to know is I hope we can reassure you that we will respond to any incident when somebody calls, and we will investigate the incident. We'll file reports when there's a crime that's occurred, which will be followed up, of course, by detectives later. But we do want to encourage anybody, if something's happening and they feel like they need the police, to call. And we'll investigate the incident and we'll follow through with any kind of criminal charges or anything that we can to help the situation for sure. So,
and to also follow up on that, probably another reason I think that we have become aware of could be a measure of embarrassment. Some folks might feel quite a bit embarrassed if they're standing in line at a grocery store and like we saw in the introductory video where, someone turns around and says, you're giving me the coronavirus, and just how humiliating that can be for someone to have to go through that. What we want to make sure that folks understand is, don't be embarrassed. What's happening to you is wrong. What's happening to you is you're being bullied and you're being treated with hate speech. So stand up. We want people to stand up with courage, and we will stand up with courage with them. Please come out of the shadows and let us know what is going on. That's the only way we're going to be able to step in and help solve that. So don't be embarrassed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Another question. Could you share the difference or definition of a hate crime and hate speech? And when is calling 911 warranted for either situation?
It's a good question. We're going to turn that one over to Lieutenant Chris Poe, who's with our Investigations Bureau.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you having me here. There is a very big difference between hate crime and hate speech, and it can be seen somewhat different to the people that it's involving. But typically, we look at a hate crime as a crime that has occurred first. So you have a criminal act, and it's motivated by bias, and that bias can be based on a person's race, religion, sexual orientation, or their gender, something like that. It can also involve property damage. We can have criminal mischiefs. We can have graffiti. We could also have possibly an arson. And so the thing to remember about a hate crime is you have a criminal offense that has occurred coupled with a bias from the offender or the suspect who's victimized someone else based on those biases. A hate speech typically could be abusive or bullying, verbiage, something that's in writing, that expresses a prejudice against the same group. Typically, we don't look at hate speech as a crime. Hate speech has been upheld and protected by the Supreme Court as a First Amendment guarantee. And so currently there is no crime involving hate speech. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat because hate speech can turn into a hate crime. And so it's important that we understand that process and how it happens. And as Chief White and Chief Caspel have touched on, when you feel like that's happened, whether it's a hate crime without a doubt or hate speech without a doubt or whatever, call us. If it's not an emergency, call us on the non-emergency line. we will respond. We may respond over the phone. There may be someone available at the desk to speak with you that's an officer, and we may send an officer to your home or to your business to help you work through what's happened so that we don't miss it, so that we do know what's going on in the community. So as Chief Caspel said, Chief White said, that way we know how to focus our resources on the areas that need to be focused on.
Thank you. Great,
And the
great,
follow-up
great answer.
question,
Great difference. Yes.
Yes, the follow-up question about when to call 911, we can touch on that a little bit. Simply, if you're the victim of a crime and it's in progress or it's just occurred and the suspect's still there or an actor is still there, the bad person is still there, call 911. We will come to your location and we will determine with you what has happened. We will aid the victims that might be there in case you're a witness, whatever the process might be. Simply as if it's a crime and it's occurring, call 911. If it's a crime that has occurred and there's been some time that's passed, and you don't feel threatened any longer, or you're no longer witnessing a crime, you can call that non-emergency number that Chief Caspel put on the screen a minute ago. And so the bottom line is report it to us. We may take the phone call in dispatch, we may take the phone call at the desk, and walking through the process with the caller, we may determine a crime hasn't occurred, and we may send you to another resource. But we won't know if you don't call. If you don't contact us or reach out to us, we're not going to know, again, where those problems are within our own community.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Excuse me, it seems that Sophia has something to say.
Yes, Sophia, I'd like to invite you to take the floor to ask your question.
I had to get off mute. I'm sorry. I'm a meme. I'm still on mute. Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Sophia Chapman. I'm the Dean of Students at the Texas Tech School of Law. And so I just want to say, first of all, this is outstanding. This is wonderful just to do this. And I'm so looking forward to continue to partner with my Asian brothers and sisters and my tech family. One of the questions I have is, for me, I work with many of our law students and work to provide support, many of our colleagues as well. For me, I have a question of a jurisdictional issue. So if an incident happens on the Texas Tech campus, is it Texas Tech PD that takes the lead? The other question I have is, I live right outside the city of Lubbock. So I am technically, when an incident happens, I have to work with the Lubbock County Sheriff's Department. I had an incident, it wasn't a hate crime, it wasn't anything, where an incident happened that occurred with my mother, but the crime happened in the city of Lubbock. So when I called to report it, I was sent from the city of Lubbock to Lubbock County Sheriff's Department, because this is where we lived, and back and forth. And so there was, I wonder about the jurisdictional issue, but I also am very curious as to people that may not understand the jurisdictional issues, and I certainly understand that from a legal perspective, but how does the handoff occur? So that, because I became very frustrated because I was worried about my mother. So how does the handoff occur, and how does that, the structure in terms of the communication between the various jurisdictional issues? Because somebody could be very scared, and it's like, I don't care if I live right outside the city of Lubbock. I see a police officer and I want them to help me. And I also want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our officers for what you do as well. So I'm just curious about that.
No, that's a great question. And I don't know if you meant to do that, but that was one of the questions that was sent to us in advance, actually, some of those jurisdictional issues, because they can be confusing and they can be frustrating. Because, yeah, there are some pretty bright lines. Lubbock really has 3 main law enforcement agencies all within Lubbock County: the Texas Tech Police Department, Lubbock Police Department, the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office. And there are some very bright lines about what is investigated with which agency. So those bright lines really are, if it is something that has occurred on the Tech campus, it's going to belong to the Texas Tech Police Department. If it's something within the city limits, but not on the Texas Tech campus, it will belong to the Lubbock Police Department. And then outside the city limits will belong to Lubbock County. Now, there certainly can be quite a bit of fog that goes on there if it's an emergency situation, or if it's a confusing situation, or like you said, being where you kind of border, if you're right on the border there. You know, when it comes right down to it, if there's something immediate going on, we're not going to worry about those jurisdictional lines. We're all going to show up. Probably the worst case scenario was when Officer Floydis Jr. was killed a couple of years ago on the Texas Tech campus. There's not a magic line there that said this is Texas Tech's border. No, we're going to send our resources to it. To dial back to a simpler situation, if we get a 911 call that there's a prowler and they're prowling around the Texas Tech library, or maybe they're right on the border of the Lubbock County line, or a wreck has occurred, we're just going to go. We're not going to worry about jurisdictional lines at the time, because when it comes to being peace officers, we can straighten out jurisdictional issues later. Our jobs really are, if it's reported a situation to us, let's go and figure out what's going on. At the right time, it might be during the call itself, it might be afterwards when it becomes a follow-up investigative portion of it, that then we can say, okay, this actually occurred on the Texas Tech campus, or it's actually out in the county. We have very good working relationships with both agencies, and so at the right time, our detectives would say, we're now going to hand this off to the investigators there. One other area that we do have, though, and it's actually the area that Lieutenant Chris Poe's over, is the metro crimes. That is actually comprised of both Lubbock County Sheriff's Department investigators and Lubbock Police Department detectives that have county-wide jurisdiction. And we use those for major crimes, for homicides, for officer-involved situations, for your big crimes. And so we created that maybe to try and break down some of those jurisdictional lines a little bit more. So if it is a major crime that has occurred either in the city or in the county, we're going to combine resources and tackle that one altogether. On your specific situation, you know, sometimes, you know, we may show up and we may be on scene and say, no, this belongs to the county. We may call the county to the scene. What we need to do is be very good about describing to the people that are there. You're exactly right. Nobody cares at that moment of whose jurisdiction this is. They just need an officer there. And we remind our folks of that quite frequently, that, hey, if there's something going on, let's show up and take care of it. We can figure out jurisdictional lines later, and we can do that on the back end during the investigative process.
Great question. Thank you both. I'd like to invite Stephen Chow to take the floor.
Thank you, Dee. Yeah, so I will say, I guess I'll be honest, frankly, I am distrustful of bringing police into most issues around Asian hate incidents, such as verbal harassment and shunning, which according to 2020 data proved to be about 88% of racist incidents reported. And especially because of those ways that bringing in police into situation exposes vulnerable populations to these carceral systems. And so while I am very appreciative of efforts from the Lubbock Police Department, such as the Crisis Intervention Team, the Homeless Outreach Team, for taking non-criminalizing approaches to issues of homelessness and substance abuse, which is really great. I am also concerned on the flip side of, you know, from your racial profiling data, for example, on motor vehicle stops, that shows that 14% of traffic stops involve Black community members when they only make up 8% of Lubbock's population. So I guess my question is kind of about, you know, what are ways that y'all are able to, what are ways that we as community members can handle issues of harassment and shunning without having to rely on y'all and bring that risk for our vulnerable populations, as well as what are those processes? Could you explain more about those processes you use to investigate those situations that don't bring disproportionate risk to those other community members?
It's a very, very good question. It is. We're gonna go to Chief White and talk about kind of what Patrol's response would be to some of that. He oversees those very key partnerships that you talked about, homeless outreach and CIT, and some of the non-traditional ways that we are trying to build bridges and respond, not necessarily in a law enforcement role, but in a helping role. So we'll let Chief White unmute himself and talk some about your question.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of what we're trying to do that's really not a traditional law enforcement role are things like these. having community forums, talking to people, finding out what the issues are from the community. If we can guess what the issues are, we can guess what problems might be out there. But if we don't hear from community members, then we really don't know. So we rely heavily on our partnerships with the community and with the different segments of our community, so that we know how to respond and what's appropriate, to respond. Obviously, our main role is law enforcement, but we have branched out with community services like the homeless outreach team and like the crisis intervention team, things like that. We're starting youth programs that we want to be inclusive of all races, everybody, to come help or come join those things, so that we can have programs where children are involved, teenagers are involved, and we can have a relationship with the youth that's not a negative relationship. They can have positive interactions with police officers, so that we can build that trust. Because not everybody trusts the police, and we understand that. So that's something that we want to work on with the community, is build those bridges and start as early as we can, to hopefully build that trust and have those relationships that'll help us do our job and make the community feel safe. Because that's really what we do. We want the community members to feel safe. We want to be there for the community and enforce the law when we have to, but it's so much more than that. We know that feeling safe and trusting the police, all those are very important issues that we work hard to try to rectify those things and make those things right.
And to follow up a little more on that, we certainly know that with some of our marginalized populations, that they feel a bit of mistrust for police, and that's our fault. That is first and foremost law enforcement's fault because of some of our history. There is no secret as to what happened last year and how much that set back community relations with police nationwide, and we are still trying to get out from underneath that. So is there inherent mistrust in some of our populations of law enforcement? Yes, there is. What we are trying to do is rebuild those bridges so that people can know that even if there is some measure of mistrust, to at least know that if police need to show up to a situation, that you can trust that we're going to show up and do right by that situation. Even then, if there is some mistrust, but there is a violation of the peace that is occurring, someone is yelling hate speech, or a crime has occurred, a wreck has occurred, at the bare minimum, if we can at least get folks to call 911 and remain anonymous, but let us know where something is occurring, we will still show up. You do not have to give your name, you do not have to give your phone number, you do not have to talk to us. But certainly if something is going on and you just need the police to come and bring peace to the situation, I hope people know enough about the Lubbock Police Department to know that we are at least trying to do things better and do things different here. So at bare minimum, if something is going on and there still is some mistrust, but you need police there, but don't want to talk to us, at least call 911, remain anonymous, and report to us that address, and let us come and try and solve that situation. At least let's try and do that.
To kind of reiterate Stephen's other part of his question, within the LPD, do you all have internal trainings, for example, bystander intervention, de-escalation trainings, courses such as that's being taught within the department? And then are there any strategies or trainings that could be provided to the Lubbock community?
Well, that's a great question. Yes, we, the state of Texas is doing a better job of mandating and altering the type of training that all law enforcement has to go through. So in order to be a police officer, you have to go through things like crisis intervention training. In order to be a mental health police officer, you have to go through week-long training on that. De-escalation is mandatory now. I mean, we have to go through that and we have to apply that. Things like duty to intervene is becoming mandatory. So if an officer sees another officer that is not behaving correctly, if they're mistreating a member of the public, in our policy, we have a duty to intervene. You have to intervene, you have to stop that, and you have to report that. So these are things that are going into our policy. They are being trained, and we are pushing that out. One of the things that we really are trying to do here at the Lubbock Police Department is we know we need to fix our house first. All of law enforcement does. We need to take a good internal look as to what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that we can then also communicate with the public about, okay, so if we show up on an incident, let's have some shared expectations. If you are pulled over by the police, let's go through the steps of what will keep everybody safe in that situation. We know that there can be some mistrust about that. We talked about the stats earlier that were pointed out. Let's make sure we have shared expectations of how the police will handle situations, as well as what the community can do in order to make sure that everyone has good communication and stays safe. We know that starts with us. And so we obviously over the past year, all in law enforcement, and Lubbock is no different, have taken good internal looks at our training, at our policies. What can we do different to build those bridges? And then have open forums like this to talk about shared expectations and what can we do to make sure that when police are there and an intervention needs to happen, what is the police role in that, but also what is the citizen's role in that, so that we have good dialogue in advance of all that. So yes, those things are underway now.
All right, a question from the chat. Do you have access to translators for those members of the Asian community who do not feel comfortable as communicating in English, especially fear and anxiety can kind of disrupt fluency?
That is an excellent question. We do. We know that because we have a robust international community here. When you have a major university, you're going to have that. So what we have in our police dispatch is we have a list of community partners that speak many different languages. And so we do have the ability, if there is a language barrier there and it is a crucial situation, we do have folks that we can call in the community that we know that will help us out over the phone, that are very willing to come to scenes with us and help translate. One thing that we do see for our Hispanic population, there is a very robust Hispanic population here in Lubbock, and a good portion of that only speak Spanish. We do have several Spanish-speaking officers. One thing that we do see is family members tend to be bilingual here in Lubbock, and so they can step in and help us on those. Specifically for our Asian community, yes, we do have resources here that can step in and translate. Even during an emergency situation, we do have those resources we can call on.
Thank you. Another question from the chat. What is the Lubbock Police Department's policy concerning undocumented people who are victims of hate crimes? I wonder if many people of all communities do not report because of the concerns over their status.
Excellent question. That'll be kind of a first response one as well. Nate, why don't you take that one if you don't mind?
So our stance is a victim's a victim. We don't check status when we respond and we're communicating with victims or helping somebody out. We're not going to ask if somebody's a citizen or not. We're not going to get into that type of information at all. We're simply going to be there to, number one, to stabilize the situation, make sure everybody's okay, get people the help they need, and then investigate the situation from there. And if you're the victim, then that's how you'll be treated as the victim. And then we'll take that information and forward it to detectives, and they'll investigate the criminal side of the, or on in the process. They'll do the investigation, but someone's status as a citizen won't be a part of that.
And, you know, something else on that, you know, we're talking about trying to build bridges here in our community, and specifically with our Asian community. You know, I don't know if I can think of anything worse than for us to go in heavy-handed and start checking people's immigration status. That's not what we do. That's not what law enforcement is for. That's a federal issue. We are not federal law enforcement officers. What we care about is people. And so if we're going to build bridges with our Asian community, we need everyone to know and to trust that, I mean this very politely but bluntly, we don't care what your status is. What we care about is you're a person, and if you're experiencing something where you need our help, we're going to provide you that help.
Thank you. So many wonderful questions this evening. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, like, I guess this question would be more for the officers and Dr. Chapman. Like, say, because we're talking about hate speech, and it is protected by the First Amendment. But then, say, for example, which I don't think it's going to happen in Lubbock. Say, I was walking in some Walmart, and then a random person just comes up to me and say, "Hey, what you doing over here? Coronavirus." And then, I mean, of course, I'd be very upset about the situation. However, I mean, it's a hate speech. So technically speaking, nobody can do nothing. But then kind of turn around and say, "Hey, this is harassment." And then, you know, like say, call the police and say, "Hey, I've been harassed here at Walmart." And would that be the case that y'all could probably handle, you know, hate speech in that?
Yeah, I'll let Lieutenant Poe talk about this one. He talked just a little bit earlier about some of that. So Chris, why don't you jump in here when you talk about how hate speech can become a hate crime and what our response really should be on that.
So when something like that happens, you may or may not immediately feel like you're going to call. Sometimes we go through a process when we have a dispute or a disagreement with someone, whether it's a road rage incident or whether it's a discussion in the line at Walmart or wherever the case may be, you may encounter people who are offensive. And so as you handle that, as you make a determination whether to de-escalate that and leave, or whether you choose to stay and continue to have that conversation, can make a determination on what we do from that point moving forward. To answer your question specifically, the person that is speaking with you could at some point cross the line and commit a criminal offense. But as long as it is speech-based and there is no imminent threat to you, and you have an opportunity to disengage from that person and walk away, and I know that's a difficult thing to do, but until it crosses the line, we would just come to just basically do dispute resolution. If that continued, that person continued to follow you, there was continued contact that was verbal in nature, that fell under hate speech, you can still call the police department. We would still respond to that dispute, to try to resolve that dispute as you begin to talk to each other or interact with each other. Would it lead to a criminal offense having occurred, a follow-up case report, a follow-up investigation, or an on-scene, on-view arrest? That's too big of a generalized idea. I can't give you the perfect go-by that checks all the boxes that says, okay, if this happens, then this, if this happens, then this. It will depend on the circumstances. But even if a crime has not occurred yet, you can still contact the police department to resolve that dispute. And we do those things all the time with neighbors, with people interacting with each other that are unhappy with each other before it escalates into a criminal offense or you become a victim. However that circumstance may play out, you can still contact us and we can still try to resolve that dispute before something bad does happen.
You know, another avenue that you might keep in mind too is if you are in a business on someone's private property. Let's say you're in Walmart. There's nothing wrong with approaching management there and saying, "Hey, this person is bothering me. I'm a customer here, and this person is bothering me. I'd really like some help there." And I think you would find that many, if not all, of Lubbock's businesses would tolerate that type of behavior in their establishments. And so I think you would definitely find some allies with the store managers and other employees there if you do find something that's occurring within their business. Yeah, feel free to speak up, and don't be surprised if they call us and we would show up and assist with that situation as well.
Thank you both. And Mr. Powell, you had shared your screen earlier with resources on how to access the report. Could you share the link to your website on, again, how to report a crime, and then the phone number for the non-emergency line, as well as your desk resource. I think that would be helpful for everybody here to have, just in case if it's ever needed. Excuse me.
Yes, I'll put that in chat for us. You got it.
Oh, thank you. Another question. What are LPD's thoughts and suggestions on capturing video evidence for hate crimes or hate speeches, and what is done in those situations?
I think I can try to answer that initially, and then anybody else can jump in if they would like. If I'm investigating a crime, to have video evidence, audio evidence of the things that transpired prior to the criminal offense, during the criminal offense, and those things that immediately followed that crime as it's concerned, as it occurs, we welcome that. We welcome that evidence. We welcome that input. It certainly would help us determine where that bias is and how that bias impacted the crime as it occurred. And people handle things a little bit differently. We talked a little bit about intervention a while previously, and at some point, someone may feel required or obligated to intervene, and everybody's cases will be different. Some people will not necessarily intervene physically, but they will stay at the scene and videotape or audio tape the transactions between the victim and the suspect. One of the things we hope happens if that occurs is that you stay present at the scene and wait for officers to arrive and allow us to take a statement from you, whether you're the victim or a witness, and discuss with you the video evidence you may have on your telephone. And then we would ask for consent to download that portion from your phone, or have you share it with someone that has the ability to capture that video evidence, so that we have that for court if it becomes necessary at some other time. And it's important that you stand by and wait for us to relate what you saw as well. It's not just the video evidence itself, but your understanding of things as it transpired. We'd also ask that you don't become involved in the conflict unless you're trying to intervene. Don't be involved in it in a way that escalates violence or escalates tension in some ways as well. And then the last thing I would ask is I would ask people to be careful not to post those videos to social media, to not stream live on Facebook, to not go to their Instagram or their Snapchat accounts or Twitter and put that information out there as we're trying to respond to determine what happens. Because it doesn't help the scenario, it doesn't help the situation any from that regard. So we welcome it. We appreciate it when it's there, especially for our violent major crimes. And it helps us get over the hurdle of bias. If we see it or hear it ourselves and can present that to the district attorney's office, that could lead to an appropriate charge of a crime that has an enhancement for it being a hate crime.
Thank you for sharing that. One final question for the evening, and I hope this would never happen, but again, it does nationwide, but what are issues related to the legality or consequences of using weapons and firearms for self-defense during a hate incident?
So when you use a deadly weapon, which would be like a knife or a firearm, something like that, it has to be, by law, it has to be justified. So you have to be able to justify or show or prove that somebody was using deadly force against you. And that doesn't mean actually stabbing you or shooting you, but if somebody's pointing a gun or holding a knife and threatening you with a knife, you would have to be able to prove that was the case. You do have the right to defend yourself. If somebody is directing what's known as deadly force in the penal code towards you, which is using a deadly weapon towards you, then you do have the right to use a weapon to defend yourself. Without deadly weapons, you know, when there's an assault or somebody, you can't use force against somebody, even if it's just physical force, just for verbal altercations. The law doesn't allow for that. It has to be in self-defense. So if you always, if you need to defend yourself, then do what you have to do to defend yourself. But I always tell people, if you can get away and call 911, we'll be there to help you. We'll get there as fast as we can. We'll do that part. We'll be there to take the person into custody, to get everything stabilized and under control, but always get away if you can and call 911. But as a last resort, if you need to defend yourself, you absolutely can in Texas. But you have to be able to show that you were really defending yourself, against deadly force if you're going to use a weapon. I hope that made sense.
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you for sharing that insight. And thank you again to the community members, to the LPD for being so open this evening to answer our questions, to provide insight into what it is that you do. And I'm going to echo the sentiments of everybody here. Thank you, Lubbock PD, for all of your efforts to keep Lubbock, Texas safe. We appreciate you and all that you're doing. And thank you for taking time out of your evening as well to connect with us community members. I'm going to turn it over to Kirk for closing statements. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dee, for facilitating the Q&A session. We are now at the end of the hour, and I would really like to thank LPD for taking the time to engage with CSFA and the AAPI and allied communities at TTU and also Lubbock. So please join me in thanking LPD for the time and effort that they made for today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs.
And I would also like to thank all of you for participating in the forum this evening and making this a productive and meaningful dialogue. So this round of virtual applause is for all of you, all the attendees. And so as we wrap up this particular forum, I would declare that the forum is officially concluded now, and LPD will be dropping off, but we invite interested attendees to stay on Zoom for another approximately 20 to 30 minutes so we can connect as a community across different groups and organizations on campus and in the community, and to share stories and experiences about facing and dealing anti-Asian hate crimes as a common community issue. So if you would like to stick around, we would love to connect with everybody. And if not, have a good evening, because we know that all of you have a very busy schedule. And thank you, everybody, for making this forum a success. Thank you again.
And thank you, Dr. Key. If there are
sorry,
any questions,
I have one thing to say.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thanks, LPD. Before you guys leave, I think I introduced one person. She is Dina Jeffries, who really initiated the first connection to the LPD. Dina, can you say a few words? Thanks.
Oh, Young-Lin, that's so nice. I will try. I'm getting over a head cold, so I don't know how long my voice will hold up, which is probably a relief to most people who I do a lot of talking with, right? Well, thank you. I just really appreciate being included and invited in a conversation like this. It's so authentic and extremely vulnerable for, I think that's probably the best word. What I have found is that we are all better together. And I just encourage your community to continue to pull together and grow in numbers, because I think as you come across unfortunate incidents, you can gain affirmation from each other and build that strength to come forward and report the things that need to be reported. And I can tell you from just probably being one of LPD's biggest cheerleaders, it's so important to understand what they're going through and how the reporting has to be done. So it's really learning on both ends of the spectrum. I can tell you, and I know he said just a few words, but I do have to say my interactions have been in the community. I had an incident where a friend of the family contacted us. They had a blind child with a service dog, and they went into a restaurant and they were actually told that they couldn't come in with the dog. And this is a bona fide service dog. And so they tried to explain very nicely to the restaurant owner that, this was, actually very illegal what they were doing. And they said, well, you can come in, but you can sit in the back. And after leaving the establishment, they were very upset and they reached out to me, and I didn't really know what to do with it either. But because of the relationships that I now have with LPD, I reached out to my good friend, Chief Caspel, who said, oh, well, what was great is that the officer that went and took the statement, you know, there probably wasn't much that they could do because unfortunately the owner can say who they can and cannot serve in the restaurant. But he took the time to explain to the owner and to educate them how this could really not turn out well for you and that we need to come together and that you have to, you know, he just steered the owner in a better direction. And so I think that's what the power of forums like this is, that I'm not going to pretend to know anything about hate crimes, but I can tell you, I can educate my circles of influence. And if I see it, I'm going to have your back and I'm going to do everything I can to make you feel comfortable to come forward. So I just appreciate being included in these conversations and I look forward to them continuing. Also, let me plug, the City of Lubbock has a community engagement task force. We meet the first Friday of every month at 7:30 a.m. We're doing them via Zoom for now, but I believe they're probably going to start happening in person pretty soon. And this is a great forum for anyone is welcome. And we hear from not only LPD, but we hear from the fire department. We hear just a lot of different information of what's going on in our community and how we can become more engaged and how we can build better partnerships. So I will reach out to Dr. Key and get you guys on a mailing list, or at least get information that we can get you guys set up to feel like you can be included, because you certainly are. So thank you again for letting me be a part of it. And Yon-Lin, we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thanks, Dina. It's also really, it's great to have you as our friend. Kirk, sorry, I have another final suggestion. How
Yes.
about everyone turn on our camera and you take a picture?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Just a few seconds. Can
Yeah,
everyone
sure.
show yourself? Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Chiefs, and also Paul. Thank you very much for showing up today, and hope to see you guys in person in the future.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
And I should mention that Dr. Yuanling Zhang was the former president of CSFA. Under his leadership last year, CSFA did quite a bit of community engagement activities as well. So thank you, Dr. Zhang, for your leadership last year. So as I suggested earlier, that officially the forum is over. So if you need to drop off, you can drop off. But for the rest of you, because we'll see a lot of new faces or faces from different organizations on campus, we would love to have an opportunity to connect across different groups and communities. So if you have another 20 minutes to spare, hang out for a little bit. So why don't we open it up for any comments or reactions that people may have, or if you have announcements from your organizations that you'd like to share with everyone online, please unmute yourself and share with all of us.